I've had snippets of songs and poetry like the Marge Piercy piece that we just heard Trudy read so wonderfully, and scripture in my mind this past week or so. And I've had this image of thousands of people walking down a wide road. Just this image of people walking, and they're dazed and they're dusty, and they're stumbling along carrying bundles and carrying children. They're carrying the elderly who cannot walk, and the disabled are wheeling along, and the wounded are on crutches, and they're just walking down that road. And my country is afraid of them. Our country has locked them out. Raging about this past week, I've been following the legal and constitutional ins and outs as best I can, as I know that many of you have. And I'm getting quite an education. Theologically, though, because that's mostly where I live, I keep hearing those snippets of songs and scripture like, you must not mistreat or oppress the foreigner because you yourselves were foreigners in the land of Egypt. We are all sojourners in a strange land, in the existential sense. One of the snippets that has been replaying in my mind is that beautiful old song, I am a poor wayfaring stranger. I don't know, some of you may know that one. It's beautiful. We all walk the same road from birth to death, and no one knows what twists are ahead on that road. Some of us experience the road as a beautiful place and feel a sense of deep belonging along the way. Others suffer more and look forward to what lies beyond that horizon in the next world. Every moral philosophy and religious tradition teaches a sense of mutual obligation and hospitality to fellow sojourners. I'm pretty sure that everyone you know would offer food and drink to someone who needs that if they were to show up. But now we're asking each other questions beyond that, again, for another wave of migration. We're asking things like, okay, food and drink. Okay, well, how about moving in? How about living in our church if you need to for a while? How about giving that sojourner a job in my workplace? How about if that stranger wants to date my daughter? What are my limits? What are our limits? And who gets to decide? I've struggled hard this week with what seems so basic and obvious to me and wondering why isn't it obvious to everyone? And I know a lot of you are in that same kind of pain, as Jim just expressed a moment ago. How could anyone slam the door in the face of thousands of people who are simply going about their interesting multinational lives? How does that benefit anyone or really keep us safe? What the hell does safe look like anyway? Does safe just mean that you don't get killed? Is that our definition? Is that anyone's definition of safe? Because it's not mine. Every American needs to ask themselves right now what it means to us to be part of a world community, because that's really what we're in. Whether we like it or not, that's what's real now. That's what's happened. We are part of an interdependent global system. I think that you and I are called at this time to help other Americans think this through. And we can use our experience of religious community to help in that task. And if you're thinking, oh God, no, it is something that takes great care and intention and maybe some discomfort and having a meal with somebody and not just, one-liners on Facebook. I want to contrast what I grew up with as an understanding of community versus how I understand it now after 2 decades of spiritual practice called congregational life. The daily practice of community, because if you extrapolate that, it really does, it applies to this whole global situation. Now, growing up, my definition of communal spirit was very close to what we call team spirit, esprit de corps. Remember the Three Musketeers? One for all and all for one. This is the essence of what I think most Americans think of when we define what is communitarian values. You think all for one and one for all, and you can see this sense of solidarity and mutuality in small town America and in close neighborhoods and among football teams and their fans, and that's my Super Bowl shout out, okay? And you see it really very much in the military and among police officers and firefighters and other public safety people. I remember how moved I was when I was in First Parish, a small town church down in Norwell, and I was doing my first funeral for a retired fire chief. And I was told that there would be an honor guard for the man who was named Parky Merritt. What a great New England name. I knew there'd be an honor guard, but when I walked into our church, went back into the narthex, I was shocked to see this huge group of firefighters all in their uniforms. And those guys filled like 5 or 6 pews. They have each other's backs. Firefighters are all for one and one for all. And I think for most Americans, that's what community ultimately means. People who have your back. And I never found any fault with that attitude until I started deconstructing it a little bit and realized that in that Three Musketeers kind of conceptualization of what it means to be in community or in solidarity, it means you're always defending each other against something, a common enemy or a danger or the opposing team, the competition. So team spirit is great if you're a valuable player. If you're not, if you can't help the team win, you're not going to belong in that community, be valued by that community for very long. If you're a firefighter, you bond over the common experience of battling blazes. When there are no more fires to put out, the experience that you had doing that together may still connect you, but your belonging in that community is based on having faced a shared danger. And if you're a soldier, you have your buddy's back because you're united against a common enemy, and it is a matter of life or death. So I'm starting to think, what would happen for humanity's moral evolution if we just had each other's backs? Period. We just because. I don't know a people who live like that. I think this is what religion points to. It's the moral commitment that the church exists to promote. And I'm beginning to understand how radically countercultural that really is to Western grounding in competition models of human community and individual worth. You are welcome in community because you're good with the bow and arrow, or because you compose great epics about gods and warriors. It goes back a really long time. You will be fed and offered shelter because you bring news from a distant land from which we need intelligence. You're welcome to be part of the community because you can give a lot of money or be in leadership in some valuable way. And we who join communities, well, we're also conditional in that way. I will consent to be part of the community if you meet my needs. I will participate in community if it seems to have value for me personally and isn't overly demanding. I will be part of the community if everyone else contributes just as much as I do. And believe me, I'm going to be checking that out. And so what about the people who can't? And I join in community not because I simply must do so in order to be fully human, but for expediency. I'm part of a group, and therefore we can get our agenda accomplished a lot better together than we can individually. A few years ago, I saw this book called Ubuntu, and it just caught my eye. And the subtitle of the book was called I in You and You in Me. So that grabbed me. I thought that was beautiful. And the author, Michael Battle, is an African-American Christian man who lived with Archbishop Desmond Tutu for 2 years in Africa. And one of the things that he learned about deeply was the concept of Ubuntu, which means personhood. And so in his time in Africa, Michael Battle developed a deep understanding of the very difference between Western and African thought about personhood. In African thought, it is the community that defines a person as a person. Each human's identity is formed, actually, interdependently through community. So as Westerners, we start with the individual. I know who I am. I have all these identities. But Africa is an enormous continent. There are many different cultures and nations within it, but this is a kind of a pan-African concept, an orientation. Think of the implications for that. It means, for one thing, that no matter how much I'm thinking about myself, whether negatively or positively, all the thoughts that I'm thinking about myself in this Ubuntu concept really doesn't add up to anything unless I am also adding to that concept of self who I am in community. I am because we are. This may sound frightening, because how can I develop my identity in a safe way if all these people are are evaluating who I am or are shaping who I am? Well, it's not frightening if the power between all the members of the community is equal. Because what that means is that everyone understands themselves through community. No one is more vulnerable to judgment than anyone else. We don't have a self without all the others, nor do they without us. And so I believe that this must create a strong sense of real intimacy and accountability, and much less of that kind of, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? Kind of transactional relationships that we often form in our culture. In the African usage, Ubuntu is something a person has, not something a person is. Here's how Michael Battle puts it. Ubuntu teaches us that the only true way to know self is in community. If I say that Mary has Ubuntu, that is to say that Mary is conscious of her personal rights only in relationship with the rights of others. Ubuntu helps us guard against the unfortunate tendency of approaching relationships as what one person can get out of the other, thereby killing the opportunity for the third life to be born, the life of community. I'm fairly new to this idea, but I'm going to be thinking about it a lot. How do we, with our fears, how do we, with our ideologies, kill the opportunity for a third life to be born, the life of community? I return to that image of all those people traveling together down that wide road. And when I study their faces in my imagination as they come down the road toward me, what I see is a doctor who may be the one working on a cure for diabetes. I see a mathematician. I see an artist whose work may inspire many. I see a child who's going to be something wonderful in people's lives. I see a girl who's going to fall in love with an American and raise children who will observe Ramadan and also open presents on Christmas morning, maybe. Someone else who watches all those people coming toward her, what she sees is a terrorist. Someone who's going to be radicalized. Danger. But is either of these visions really right? I thought for a long time I must be the one who was right. Seeing all that potential goodness and all those contributions represented by those people. But now I'm beginning to think that even I have some growing to do, because even if I don't see the face of a terrorist approaching in that crowd, I don't have Ubuntu, because I have seen those people for what they might contribute, not simply because they are. I have welcomed them for what they might do and make better, not because they are simply people who deserve an opportunity to live free from harm. When we have Ubuntu, we will see all those human beings not as people who do something for us or something to us. We won't see their faces at all, in fact. What we will see is the road ahead, the same horizon that they see. Because, you see, we will be walking side by side with them.